Hi, I'm Tawny Plattis, and you're listening to Dirty Bits, the podcast that covers the sexy, scandalous, and salacious stories from history your teacher probably left out. Be sure to join us on social media, where we'll be doing giveaways of exciting new merchandise this week and every week. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/dirtybitspodcast and our Facebook discussion group, the Dirty Bits Podcast Group, where we post art history memes and talk all things historically filthy. You can connect with us on Instagram at Dirty Bits Podcast and Twitter at the Dirty Bits Pod. If you're enjoying the show, you can also leave us a review on Facebook or iTunes. We love talking with our listeners and would be delighted if you joined in with us. You might even get a shout out on our next episode, like our lovebug Trent, who wrote us the sweetest review on iTunes and posts some of the funniest shit in our group. He says, "Body, titillating truths from out of time." I'm going to tell you a scandalous secret that I figured out about this podcast. It's that the Dirty Bits podcast secret magic is made up of two key elements. One is the narrator's charming and delightful voice. Aw. Sharing secrets or a joke with you using modern slang and pop culture humor to get her point across. Catherine the Great was like Phoebe from Friends. At times, it's laugh out loud hilarious, and I have to roll it back a bit to re-listen. The other is that it's obvious Tawny Plattis loves her subjects and does her research. You'll get true tales about real people and some surprising insights. For example, did you know that Julie d'Aubigny dueled 3 men at once? The language is somewhat not safe for work, as are some of the topics discussed because, hey, conversations about sex are bound to have some dirty bits. Give it a try. I truly suspect you'll enjoy it. Thank you, Trent. You're the best. All of our links are available in the show notes here and on our website, tawnyvoice.com/dirtybits. Many of you have requested longer, bigger, more frequent episodes. We would absolutely love to bring the show to you full time. And if that's something you would like to see, you can help us work towards making that a reality by visiting us at patreon.com/dirtybits and becoming an official Dirty Birdie. Every donation helps us achieve our goal of bringing more to the show, like animation, merchandise, and the ability to satisfy your every craving. A giant thank you to our newest Dirty Birdies this week who have donated on Patreon. We are seriously overwhelmed by your generosity and are so excited to start sending you all of the patron-only goodies we have for you. Every one of your contributions to the show means so much, especially to those who aren't able to donate, and George and I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. And lastly, we promised you a full reading of the James Joyce letters. Turns out, it was such a good idea, Patchett Brewster beat us to the punch quite a while ago. She's hysterical, and you should definitely check it out on YouTube. We definitely don't want to infringe on any fellow comedians, and we'll be releasing something uniquely ours soon. We appreciate you understanding. Thanks, lovebugs. Enjoy the show. In this episode of the Dirty Bits podcast, we're taking it way back to ancient Rome, where every name is fun to say, and much of the history is composed of hearsay, rumors, and downright bullshit. It also means the stories are always outrageous and absolutely perfect for the Dirty Bits podcast. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Augustus, or as history remembers him, Elagabalus, was born on March 11, likely in the year 203 or 202, depending on how picky you want to get. He was part of the Severan dynasty, which was founded in the year 193 by the Roman general Lucius Septimius Severus, no relation to Harry Potter. Elagabalus was born in what is present-day Syria and was the second son of Julius Sammias and Sextus Varius Marcellus. His father Marcellus was a Roman aristocrat and politician who was from the ancient Greek city of Apamea. Little is known about his origins. He did have an impressive political career. From the year 205 until the year 207, he was basically appointed as the CFO of the Roman aqueducts, which he rocked at so hard that he was given a promotion as the tax collector of all of Roman Britain and was totally in charge of the private finances of the emperor. Yet again, the father of a Dirty Bits subject is a tax collector. He had a few other promotions in his life, and eventually became the Roman governor of Numidia. Elagabalus's mother Julia was a Syrian Roman noblewoman, the first daughter of the powerful Syrian nobles Julia Maesa and Gaius Julius Avitus Alexanus. Her maternal aunt was the Roman empress Julia Domna, and her maternal uncle, through marriage, was the emperor Lucius Septimius Severus. So what you mostly need to take away from all of that is Marcellus probably married his wife to further his political career because she was related to the Severan dynasty of the Roman Empire and the royal family of Emesa. And if you were a person of the lady variety, there was about a 98% chance your name was Julia. Marcellus and Julia, Elagabalus's parents, were married anywhere between the year 192 and the year 200, and lived in Rome because Julia was a member of the imperial royal family. Elagabalus's dad Marcellus died around the year 215. And, fun fact, much of what we know about Marcellus comes from the inscriptional message on his tombstone, which was dedicated to him by his wife and their 2 sons. The tombstone was found in Velletri, not far from Rome, and has 2 preserved inscriptions in Latin and Greek. Its current home is in the octagonal court in the Vatican museums. Just 2 years later, Julia's cousin, the Emperor Caracalla, was killed because he had a reputation for being a giant turd, and is still considered one of the cruelest, most tyrannical rulers of ancient Rome by many historians. Like, even his nickname, Caracalla, came from the word used to describe a hooded coat from Gaul that he introduced into Rome. So he was essentially one of those moody guys always wearing his hoodie. In the year 202, Caracalla was forced to marry a woman who he hated. Unfortunately, there's no explanation as to why he hated her, which is truly unfortunate because he had her father executed for treason, in which he fabricated the evidence himself. So you have to wonder what it was that he detested about her so much. She probably rolled the toilet paper the wrong way, in which case, you can't blame the man. So after his father-in-law was out of the way, he banished his wife, who was later murdered, possibly under Caracalla's command. Caracalla briefly co-ruled the empire alongside his brother, Geta, after their father, the emperor, died in a campaign. It was while they were transporting their father's ashes that the brothers began bickering with such hostility that they considered splitting up the empire. Their mom said no, to which Caracalla must have interpreted as, that's too complicated, and decided to just murder Geta instead because the simplest solution is often best. Caracalla then persecuted and executed most of Geta's supporters. An estimated 20,000 people were murdered, all of whom were either in Geta's inner circle of guards or were his advisors, friends, or other military staff under his employ. But Caracalla had to take it even one step further by having Geta's image removed from all paintings. Coins with his image were melted down, statues of him were destroyed, his name was struck from papyrus records, and it became a capital offense to speak or write Geta's name. About a year later, Caracalla goes on these provincial military tours, and he began to exhibit more of the erratic behavior he would become infamous for. He focused all of his attention on his military and largely ignored all other matters of state. He was so obsessed with his budget-draining military campaigns, he never even returned to Rome. He couldn't be bothered with ruling the country, so his mom, uniquely named Julia, had an enormous influence in state affairs, surrounded herself with thinkers and writers from all over the empire, and was given the title Mother of the Camp. This is often cited as the beginning of a trend of emperors' mothers having influence, a trend which would continue throughout the Severan dynasty. Historian Edward Gibbon describes Caracalla as the common enemy of mankind, since both Romans and provincials alike were subject to his cruelty. So in the beginning of the year 217, Caracalla was at Edessa with a large army preparing to start a new invasion of Parthia, and he stops to take a leak when a soldier, Justin Martialis, stabs him to death, and he dies with his dick out. Macrinus was the guy who arranged the assassination and then was declared emperor. But boy did Macrinus have a doozy of a time trying to get Rome back into the swing of things. His predecessor had totally drained all their funds with his military obsession, and while Macrinus was able to negotiate peace with other countries, the continuing financial burden took a toll on Rome. Now, Macrinus wasn't a part of his predecessor's family, and he knew they were a little wacky, so he exiled Elagabalus and his family to their estate in Syria, just to be safe. The family arrives, unpacks, and Elagabalus's mom goes, "Okay, family meeting, so how are we going to overthrow this fucker and get 14-year-old Elagabalus on the throne?" And they work out this plan saying that Elagabalus was actually the illegitimate son of Caracalla, so all those soldiers and senators who had sworn allegiance to the Iron Islands-like psychopath were obligated to support Elagabalus. In May of the year 218, Publius Valerius Comazon, commander of the legion, declared Elagabalus emperor. To strengthen his legitimacy, Elagabalus assumed Caracalla's names, Marcus, Aurelius, Antoninus. So Macrinus, who's out trying to fix what Caracalla royally fucked up, gets word about this kid they're saying is emperor now, and he sends in some troops to crush the rebellion. But the troops go double agent on Macrinus, turn on their commander, and join Elagabalus's team. Macrinus sends letters to the Senate going, "This teenager is legit insane. What are you letting happen over there? I swear to God, I leave for 5 minutes. You know what? He's not the real ruler. You need to take care of this." And the Senate goes, "Yeah, totes and approps," and declares war on Elagabalus, his mother, and all of his supporters. But Macrinus and his troops had been so weakened by the desertion of the double agent troops, he was defeated in about a month in the Battle of Antioch. So Elagabalus became the emperor of Rome at the age of 14, and immediately started having problems, largely due to his religious beliefs. He had been a priest of Elagabal, the sun god, in his hometown of Syria. He was really into it, declaring Elagabal chief deity of the Roman pantheon, as opposed to Jupiter. Herodian, the author of Historia Augusta, claims that the teenage emperor maintained an excessively luxurious lifestyle, saying he had couches made of solid silver, dined on delicacies like camel heels, cock combs, and nightingale tongues, gave his dog goose livers, and held naval battles in basins of wine. And his advisor, who had basically got the kid on the throne, was like, "Hey dude, you might want to ease up on the religious stuff and also the hedonist stuff just a bit. I know you like nice things and you're super into your god, but it's coming off as really pushy, pretentious, and douchey, and you're really starting to piss people off." Elagabalus responded by saying, "Oh yeah?" and stabbed him until he was dead. Even as emperor, he continued to act as high priest. His mom had a painting of him all dolled up in his robe sent to Rome and hung above the goddess Victoria. So every time somebody made an offering to Victoria, they were also making an offering to Elagabal. But he really started grinding people's gears when he married a Vestal virgin, Aquilia Severa. This caused enormous scandal, as the virgins were priestesses of Vesta, goddess of the hearth, and had also taken a 30-year vow of celibacy. Breaking this vow resulted in the priestess being buried alive. However, Elagabalus was like, "Oh my gosh, we can make godlike babies! I'm the emperor, it's fine, you won't be buried alive, swearsies." Unfortunately, Aquilia's reaction wasn't well documented. Shocker. And some historians and sources say she was forced to marry against her will. So the people were kind of starting to eyeball each other like, "Oh shit, what did we do? We just handed over the reins to a 14-year-old, and he's a Syrian." Because racism has always been a thing. There's also a substantial amount of evidence that points to the possibility that the Roman citizens considered Elagabalus an outsider, and didn't care for him simply because he was a foreigner. Syria was considered Oriental, and many stereotypes were attached to his name, possibly because he was just different from the Romans. Like when he first entered the capital, he took one look at the wool togas and said, "Fuck that, silk's better, y'all better just get used to this mode of dress." His cult was celebrated with orgiastic and ecstatic rituals, which were in direct contrast with the Romans' own ceremonies that were very somber and serious. He had himself circumcised in order to become a high priest. He would slaughter hundreds of oxen and loved dancing with his gal pals. He would put on these ragers every summer solstice dedicated to his god, which actually became pretty popular with the citizens because everyone likes free food. He would place the stone that represented the god on a chariot that was all souped up with gold and jewels, and then he'd take it on a jaunt around town. The ancient historian Herodian wrote, "A 6-horse chariot carried the divinity. The horse is huge and flawlessly white, with expensive gold fittings and rich ornaments. No one held the reins, and no one rode in the chariot. The vehicle was escorted as if the god himself were the charioteer. Elagabalus ran backward in front of the chariot, facing the god and holding the horse's reins. He made the whole journey in this reverse fashion, looking up into the face of his god." Which naturally brings us to the next reason for his defamation, and the title often given to him as one of the worst emperors of all time. He was eccentric, hedonistic, loved luxury, and was incredibly effeminate. According to the ancient historian Cassius Dio, Elagabalus spent his time pursuing feminine tasks, like making clothing. He used makeup, and he would alter his voice to sound more like a lady voice. His first wife was named Julia, surprise, surprise, and he divorced her within a year to marry that Vestal virgin we were talking about earlier. But Cassius Dio says his most stable relationship was actually with Heracles, whom he referred to as his husband. According to him, Elagabalus took on the title of bride when he married the charioteer Heracles, who allegedly beat him up on the reg. He supposedly delighted in displaying the black eyes his lover would give him. That being said, many of the claims made by ancient historians are controversial, which is something we'll revisit again here momentarily. The ancient historian also says that Elagabalus would paint his eyes, epilate his body hair, and wear wigs before prostituting himself in taverns, brothels, and even the imperial palace. He writes, "Finally, he set aside a room in the palace, and there committed his indecencies, always standing nude at the door of the room, as the harlots do, and shaking the curtain which hung from gold rings, while in soft and melting voice he solicited the passers-by." There were, of course, men who had been specially instructed to play their part, for as in other matters, so in this business, too, he had numerous agents who sought out those who could best please him by their foulness. He would collect money from his patrons and give himself airs over his gains. He would also dispute with his associates in this shameful occupation, claiming that he had more lovers than they and took in more money. Herodian commented that Elagabalus enhanced his natural good looks by the regular application of cosmetics. And if the surviving busts are to be believed, he was incredibly pretty. He was described as having been delighted to be called the mistress, the wife, the queen of Heracles. He was also reported to have offered vast sums of money to any physician who could equip him with female genitalia. Elagabalus has been characterized by some modern writers as one of, if not the first, known transgender ruler. However, this really didn't fly with all the guys in the Roman army at the time. They didn't care for his eccentricities, and his relationship with Heracles wasn't appreciated. Elagabalus's grandmother, Julia Misa, perceived that popular support for the emperor was waning, so she decided that he and his mother, who had encouraged his religious practices, had to be replaced. As alternatives, she turned to her other daughter, named Julia, Avita Mamaea, and her daughter's son, the 13-year-old Severus Alexander. Elagabalus was not down with his cousin being preferred to himself, and made several attempts on the kid's life. When those didn't pan out, he stripped his cousin of his titles, revoked his consulship, and started a rumor that Alexander was super sick and near death. A riot ensues over all of this, and the Roman army goes, "Enough of this bullshit. Both of you kids need to get your asses down here to camp. We need to talk to you." So the boys show up, and everyone's like, "Yay, Severus Alexander, woo!" And they totally ignore Elagabalus until the army attacks him and his mother. Ancient historian Cassius Dio says, he made an attempt to flee, and would have gotten away somewhere by being placed in a chest, had he not been discovered and slain at the age of 18. His mother, who embraced him and clung tightly to him, perished with him. Their heads were cut off, and their bodies, after being stripped naked, were first dragged all over the city, and then the mother's body was cast aside somewhere or the other, while his was thrown into the river. After he was assassinated, many of his buds were murdered, including his lover Heracles. All of his religious edicts were voided. Women were once again prevented from attending Senate meetings, and damnatio memoriae was enacted, which is when a person of disgrace is erased from public record. In ancient Rome, sexual misconduct, as dictated by society, was used to attack a leader's character, so not much has changed there. Ancient historians wrote things like the emperor lived most licentiously, from first to last, and used his body both for doing and allowing many strange things, which no one could endure to tell or hear of. And he sent out agents to collect men with large members, prostituted himself in the palace, and invented certain new kinds of vice, even going beyond the perversities used by the debauchees of old. What's interesting is many of the ancient historians who wrote about the most scandalous and salacious accusations did so over a century after the events allegedly took place. Recent historians have painted a much less Caligula-like depiction of the teenaged emperor. Martin Ix, whose work was largely utilized in my research, attributes the emperor's unorthodox religious policies that excluded the elite as the reason for his assassination, as well as his grandmother's desire to replace him. He simply could have been the easy scapegoat in the family power struggle. So after Elagabalus and everyone in his entourage were literally assassinated, the character assassination then began so as to admonish future rulers not to repeat the same mistakes as their predecessor. A quick online search reveals that thousands of years later, the rumors about the murdered 18-year-old persist, and he can be found on top 10 lists like worst Roman emperors and most perverted rulers of all time. One can't help but wonder if things would have turned out differently. If only he had a really fantastic PR team and had been able to utilize Twitter to explain himself. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or corrections for me, feel free to email us at tawny@tawnyvoice.com or let us know on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or our website, tawnyvoice.com. See you next Tuesday.